السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على خير المرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Welcome back to our nightly conversation and visiting chapters, verses, sections of the Quran for this month of Ramadan. The month of Ramadan is the month of the Quran, and the Quran is both looking at the biography of the Prophet ﷺ, but also looking at biographies of prophets that are mentioned in the Quran. So today I wanted to take a few minutes to visit with Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam. It's chapter 12 of the Quran, and it is really one of those chapters that deal with the predicament of the human being. And the predicament not in the sense of to put it in negative, but to deal with all of the complexities, the entanglement, all the issues that we face as human beings are all really crystallized in the narrative of Yusuf, the Prophet Yusuf. For those on the English language, the Prophet Joseph. And there are similar rendition of the narrative of Yusuf in the Quran and the biblical text with minor differences. So let's take a few minutes and visit with the story and why the story, even the Quran itself in this chapter, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about al-qasas, which is qissa, qasas, stories, narrative, and it's through this narrative that we get some moral lessons that are so critical for us. So setting the grounding first in relations to the Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam. What we get in from the first verses is that the Prophet Yusuf tells his father of a dream that he had, saying that he have a dream of أحد عشر كوكبا والشمس والقمر لي ساجدين. That he says that I have a dream of 11 planets and the sun and the moon are prostrating for me. And his father counseled him to say not to convey this to his own brothers. And from this moment we move immediately in a couple of verses into the narration that speaks about Yusuf's brother conspiring to get rid of him. In the sense, both Yusuf and his own brother Benjamin are seen by their brothers. Benjamin is a full brother to Yusuf, while the rest of the brothers are half brothers from another wife, and both Yusuf and Benjamin's own mother died when they were at a young age. So they say that Yusuf and his brother are more beloved to our father than us. And they begin to have ideas as a result of what we call today is sibling rivalries, but it's actually escalate much more. It is how to gain, or at least how to assume one's parents' love, in particular here the father. So they hatch a plan to get rid of Yusuf. And they actually contemplate to kill him, but then they settle on throwing him in the water well with the hope or with the idea that a caravan or some would actually pick him up and take him on away from the area. And sure enough, they say that their own self have thrown these ideas on them, and they carry on with the plan. So the brothers both throw Yusuf into the well, and sure enough, a caravan traveling picks him up from the well in surprised fashion, and they take him with them going toward Egypt. and they sell him into slavery. And the Quran says بِثَمَنٍ بَخْسٍ, really with a cheap price, because they really didn't know who this young boy that they have uh, taken into the caravan and sold him into slavery. And the story and then now shifts into Egypt, away from Yusuf and from Yusuf's brother, his father, and their abode, or their areas of living. In Egypt, Yusuf becomes in a house of an affluent regional ruler at the time. And the story takes on as Yusuf is known to be a man with the Quran, as well as the Prophet ﷺ describe him that he was given a considerable beauty as a man, and he becomes the subject of attraction and subject of infatuation and desire. So much so that the wife of his master begins to have a desire for him, to have him for herself. And in here we get what we call a form in the Quran of a sexual harassment. So in the Quran, the sexual harassment is taking place from a woman pursuing her servant. So even that today, when we speak about sexual harassment, it's usually most often because sexual harassment and at least sexual violence, if you add to it, and rape is about really having power and control. So here in the Quran, we get that the Imra'atul Aziz, which is the term that was used in the Quran, تراوده عن نفسه, that she is actually trying to get him to actually partake in the pursuit. And at an encounter, she closes the door and tries to convince him to engage in sexual relations with her, and he actually rejects the overture or the offer, and in essence he tries to run away, and she grabs him from the back of his shirt, where at the point where he's running out of the door, his master comes in, and the wife immediately accuses Yusuf of actually being aggressive, trying to pursue her, and he is the aggressor. And the dialogue in the Quran speaks about an arbiter or a judge that is brought to actually determine what happened, and he says that if his shirt is cut or ripped from the front, then he is the aggressor and she is innocent. But if it is from the back, then she is the aggressor and he is the innocent. And sure enough, his shirt is torn from the back, meaning that he was trying to run away from this encounter. The story develops that the Imra'atul Aziz, the wife of his master at the time, continues to conspire, which culminates in him being sent to jail or to prison at the time. And in the prison he meets two individuals, and once again he actually interprets their dreams. So one of the skills of Yusuf that was given to him by God is the ability to interpret dream, that which in essence for Muslims, that one aspect of prophethood is the ability to actually, dreams are a sign or a path of revelation. So in this sense, Yusuf is receiving revelation in the forms of ability to interpret dreams and to actually foretell the future and what are the occurrences or the events that will take place. And the story moves forward that one of the two individuals that he interpreted their dreams for them in prison end up becoming in an important position, a servant in the palace of the ruler, who has a dream that no one is able to interpret. And this servant says that I do know a person is in prison who will be able to interpret the dream for you. And Yusuf is brought out of prison. He interprets the dream about 7 years of drought to be followed by 7 years of plentiful cultivation, followed by 7 years of drought. So he counsels the ruler to save some of the crops from the plentiful years to feed or to have sustenance in the 7 years of drought. And then the question about what happened to him arises, and at that point the truth about what happened to Yusuf is actually manifest, and he ends up becoming, or the ruler appoints him as a minister of the treasury, or a person that is accountable, because he says, appoint me to this, I am a person that knows how to operate. So Yusuf gets to be appointed in a very important position, in a position of what we call today maybe is the Secretary of Treasury, or Minister of Treasury, or Minister of Budget, Finance. All those would be is that he becomes accountable and managing the affairs of the society. And the days pass, and his own brothers are sent to conduct a trade in Egypt. And he recognizes them, but they don't recognize him. So in this sense, he begins to try to see how he could not to get back at them, but to at least get some, for them to reflect back on what they have done. So in one of their visits, he actually puts the measurement, or Sa'il Malik, or the measurement tool in their caravan, and then he says that the Sa'il Malik is lost or stolen, and that it's been we need to search for it, and they find it in the luggage, or in their luggage, because that's what they place it. And he says that we need to make sure that whoever we found this sa' in their luggage, we will take him and stay here until we determine the affairs of what to do with them. And in this, the narrations goes back and forth. The culmination of this is that he recognizes, or he at least tells his own brother Benjamin, who he keeps behind because he puts the sa' in his luggage. He keeps him, he informs him that I am your brother Yusuf. And then he sends his brothers back to tell their father what happened with them. And their father actually remembers the loss of Yusuf to them. And they actually reproach him for still mentioning Yusuf at that point. The first dream, which is that I have witnessed, or I have had a dream of 11 planet and the sun and the moon, is in essence crystallized in the conclusion of this, where Yusuf brings his brothers into Egypt with his father and family, and inform them who he is, and then at that point they recognize what they have done wrong. So this is just a brief sketch of the story, or the narration, from beginning to end. Now, stopping back and pulling back on the things that we could draw out from this. Again, we have the sibling rivalries that is there. We have the slavery, because again, Yusuf being taken from the well and sold into slavery. We have his in facing a sexual harassment while he is being employed. So it's in a power relationship, him being employed, and sexual relations. We have unjustly being put in jail and spending time in prison. And then we have companionship relationship that are developed in prison that becomes a way for coming out of prison, but also by Allah's will that this happened. But it is also that he developed a network, or the network of the prisoners who were with him ended up also in circumstances where that becomes part of his arrival at a position of prominence, and the transformation from being a slave in prison to rising up into the position of a minister of treasury responsible for all the treasures of Egypt and to rescue the society at that time. And then the story turned around on his own brothers. Rather than taking revenge of them, he forgives them and also asks them and bring them to live with him in Egypt, and thus in essence their deliberate attempt to kill him and get rid of him elevated him in his status and his position. Now for me, when I look at the story of the Prophet Yusuf, I definitely would compare the if you think about the Prophet Yusuf and the predicament and the challenges that have faced the black community in America. One can actually take a look and compare what transpired with the black community in America being taken from Africa, thrown into the water well, but it's the massive water well. It was the Atlantic Ocean. And in this case, we have a large number. We don't know even the number of those who perished in the Middle Passage. And yet those who were pulled up and arrived in the hulls of these enslavement ships land in America, in Natchez, Mississippi, in New Orleans, in Sapelo Island in Georgia, up and down the East Coast, all the way down to Africa. And they emerge out of this into the plantation and into enslavement. And they struggle and persevere under the most horrendous conditions. And yet they rise up, and time again they rise up to the level that they actually, if you think about the Civil Rights Movement, and even before the Civil Rights Movement, Frederick Douglass, W.D. Du Bois, if you think about the turn of the century movement for rights that culminates later on into a full civil rights with Martin Luther King. And for Muslims, again, we could immediately identify with the narrative of Malcolm X coming out of prison and in a short period of time walking with kings, and the kings feel inferior walking next to him. Right? And you could push it all the way to what transpired in here, because there are often this fear that individuals who might gain an upper hand after being persecuted, oppressed, sold into slavery, put in prisons, that somehow they're gonna come out with a mode of revenge, which is always this deep fear. We could see it in the deep fear again with possibly when we talk about Israel and the Zionists in relation to the Palestinians, that if we give them back what we stole from them, they might seek revenge. And for those who are observing the development that are taking place in Jerusalem today, where in essence you could actually compare it to Kristallnacht during the period of attacking Jewish neighborhoods in Germany and other places. This is what the Palestinians now are facing in Jerusalem. So this fear of revenge, which Yusuf would have been justified to take his revenge from his own brothers, uh, flesh and blood, that actually throw him on down in the water well, and he would have been justified to actually arrest them at the time. It would be justified for him to recompense, but again, he actually took the higher ground, which is what we call uh, forgiveness, which is the highest form actually of expressing mercy, because mercy is the ability to forgive when you have the maximum ability to inflict and exert and extract revenge on those who done you wrong. It is not mercy. You're not merciful if you're just in a weak position. You are in a position not to be able to do so, and say, I'm being merciful, I'm not going to take my rights from you. That's, it's a mix between a powerless and a coward in this sense, and that's not mercy. Mercy is to be able to actually take your to extract your revenge, to take what is owed for you, but you decide to forgive because you're looking at possibly a higher level of consideration, right? So that's why in the Quran it says, if God would have treated you exactly in relations to your conduct overall, you would be definitely in a very difficult position with God. But God is the all merciful, because Allah gives and extends mercy, even though that He would be in His rightful divine position to extract revenge at any moment. And therefore, for each wrong, we are equated with one wrong, but for each good deed, we're given 10. So God is all merciful in terms of trying to constantly outbalance our accounts. So that's why I would say that if you think about our contemporary period and the challenge that we face, the chapter of Yusuf, from beginning to end, really is both a prescription for us, a description of what we are going through, but also a prescription of how to come out of that state. And I didn't even mention that his father became blind as a result of the deep sorrow for the loss that he faced. First with Yusuf, and then Benjamin, when he was held back by Yusuf, that he was really feeling the trauma of the loss. And I would think of all the Palestinians, all the Kashmiris, all the black communities in America, and native populations, and what they have went through, the Aboriginal population, and also I would, as a person who has studied history, I would say just the trauma that the Jewish communities have experienced through the years. And that's often where some of the challenge for us as Palestinians is, how can it be that the Jewish community that just have faced the ravages of Europe turn around and do to the Palestinians what they have experienced, which is really a moral conflict, in essence, of how to actually this one time really understand what they have went through, and simultaneously be able to challenge the wrong that is being done. So the chapter of Yusuf is this narration that actually speaks to what we face on a daily basis. And it is also a narrative of that God will actually find a way out for you. It's a narration that tells us that you trust in Allah, and Allah will find and open doors for you that you have not actually contemplated. Right? So in chapter of Yusuf, we see this, and his constant, really constant focus on trying to fulfill his divine inscribed purpose, what took him from the depth of a water well into the heights of what we call temporal power. Even though he didn't seek the temporal power, it was given to him as a result of his devotion, dedication, sense of justice, and perseverance in this sense. And more importantly, the fact that he forgave his own brothers partook of a divine attribute, which is the attribute of mercy. So he was merciful at the moment where he could actually been justified, as well as able to exert the revenge that was due to him as a result of the circumstances. So in thinking about our own conditions, we often think of it that because we're in the modern world, we're in the technological age, we're in this, that our circumstances are unique, that is not comparable. And I think in here what we need to differentiate is that the narrative of the past is still as valid and vivid for our own experience as it was at the time or at the circumstances that they narrated. The only difference is our technological tools that possibly have become almost a veil for us from recognizing the predicaments that we are in. But the story, the moral, ethical narrations are there. The sibling rivalries is there. How we deal with one another is there. Slavery have been abolished, but we do have a human trafficking that is taking place. And unfortunately, I would say that some of our Muslim countries, like many other countries, whether in Russia, United States, China, India, and also parts of the Middle East and the Gulf, that human trafficking is a reality. And we cannot shield ourselves by thinking that we're only speaking about history in the past and not confronting the reality of today's human beings. And just to think about the refugees that are drowning on the Mediterranean on a daily basis, or those refugees that are crossing the borders and drowning in the Rio Grande, coming out from Latin America. So Yusuf is with us. It's just we don't look at him because we're preoccupied with trying to actually think of all the material that is around us. And really we are at this point, possibly, if not individually, but collectively, are the ones that are pushing people into the water well and expecting some others to take care, or not take care, but to commodify and repurpose a whole bunch of people that we consider, or at least we have treated them as human rejects. These are humans that we have accepted for them to be the cost of our contemporary world. So Yusuf is with us, we just don't see him. Yusuf is in prison, we don't see him. Yusuf is also subject to sexual harassment, both Yusuf of men, but also Yusuf is symbolic of the sexual harassment that women face on a daily basis. So Yusuf is with us, we just don't see him, or we are too preoccupied, not wanting to alter our status, our position, or use all types of excuses of why we can't confront the reality that is in front of us. So for me, the chapter of Yusuf is just a magnificent narration of elements of the human condition. And I encourage you and myself and others to continue to reflect upon it, to read the particulars of the chapter, but to reflect also on the broader meanings in order for us to actually reach the level to be able to transform the society. The last thing I say, that Yusuf, the one that was in jail, is the Yusuf that rescued the society. Right? Because without his interpretation, without his becoming the custodian of the treasury, uh, the drought would have caused the death of so many. So the question for all of us, how many Yusufs of today are languishing in our prisons, both the physical prisons, but more of the mental prisons that we don't allow them to come out to address, to save, to cure, to transform our society today? That is the question for us when we read the chapter of Yusuf. So, Jazakumullah khair. Thank you for being with me today. If you like what you heard, please share it with others and continue to visit my YouTube and Facebook. And hopefully, I'll see you inshallah tomorrow. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept your fasting, your prayers, your dua, your qiyam. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless you, bless your family, and to grant you all the blessings that you are seeking, both those that are manifest and those that are not, are away from your own realization. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to provide you good health and to provide a cure for you and all your families and anyone in your family that has been affected by COVID-19. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give mercy to all of those who have died in this past year as a result of COVID, but also all those who passed away. I ask for Allah to actually give you the patience as you heal and you deal with the pain of separation. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you, and assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.